You're listening to the Final Say Radio Show, a Rappaport Media production, with your host Brett Rappaport and co-host John Rappaport.
We have our guest, Jim Swift, is with the Weekly Standard. Great people, and you folks join us so often to discuss all these issues. So, Jim, welcome to the Final Say Radio Show, and thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thanks. Do I have the pleasure of Brett and John, or do we just have Brett today?
No, this is just Brett. John took a week-long business trip over to France and Germany, and he's actually flying back today, but he wasn't able to come back in time for the program today. So sorry.
In-flight Wi-Fi is killer across the Atlantic, so maybe next time. Well, thanks for having me on the show.
No, it is great, and it's one of my favorite topics, Obamacare. Mm-hmm. And I think the interesting thing here is when you look at any governmental entity and any bill where they have an obligation to properly track the data and the numbers and substantiate to the American taxpayer where the money's going, how it's being spent, and is something actually being done in a productive way, meaning accountability. And what we're finding out is, according to the GAO, the data and the numbers that are being provided or collected aren't even proper, and there is no really reliable anything to look at outside of estimates that I guess, if I understand this correctly, that CMS is coming up with, and we know how reliable they are.
Right. I think you might be also referring to tangentially to a story by my colleague across a couple blocks, Mark Tapscott from the Examiner, had a great piece today about how CMS's Center for Consumer Information and Insurance Oversight basically told Congress and the GAO when Congress had requested a report on their activities. Now, these are the folks who are supposed to oversee, the implementation of the provisions and all these sorts of things. I mean, really, they're supposed to be the people who are the econometricians who are pulling the levers and, looking at seeing how this very complex system, works. And the TLDR is that they can't tell if it works, and they can only provide broad estimates, which kind of goes to a Keynesian versus maybe Austrian perspective on how well the government is able to play God with economics or economic systems like healthcare, or how well they don't.
Well, let me put it this way. In my opinion, we are now approaching $18 trillion in debt. That doesn't include what the states have racked up. We have all these crazy socialist programs. Whether you're for socialism or against socialism, you'd have to admit that we've spent a lot of money and haven't fixed one single problem. In fact, every time we try, we create more. So now, as we're taking over 18% of a part of our economy, by the way, a particular part that seems to be one of the only growing sectors. And there's no accountability. There's no justification for any of the actions that are being taken. And I'll give you an example. Like if we had originally said we're passing a bill and our intention is to add to the amount of people who have insurance in this nation by, say, 50%. Well, how are you ever supposed to know if you've accomplished your goal if you can't even track the numbers, or you have no idea how many people are actually working in your different parts of the administration to do various work on various projects, and it's crazy. And yeah. I'm sure there's hundreds of examples we could use here, such as we saw the stories of we were spending millions of dollars for private companies to call people and try to sign them up, and then we realized that we were basically paying 30 people to sit around and do nothing because they signed up 10 people in a course of 6 months. I mean, I think you could throw darts at a phone book and do a better job.
Well, with all this spending that you point out that takes place in Obamacare, I mean, it's worth noting that, one of the president's kind of stronger, more emotive building blocks for selling it was the number of the uninsured. Of course, those who cared to find out the real details quickly found out that the 30 some odd million or however many, it of course changed, sort of like Neil deGrasse Tyson's quotes. It changed with different iterations about how many people are uninsured. But the problem that people uncovered, which was the statistic that the president and his allies were quoting, was basically a statistic of the amount of people who in one calendar year lacked insurance. Now, if you were, jobless for 2 weeks, and you got another job and you got health care again, you were part of the 30 million uninsured. I mean, I at one point was a member of the uninsured as I was a freelance journalist for a while and didn't have health insurance. They weren't even able to give us good numbers then, and now they're spending hundreds of millions of, if not billions of dollars in the whole broad scheme of things on this. But at least, according to Tapscott's article, like about $80 million in salary for these people over at CMS, and, they can't even really tell us much of anything now. I guess it's a jobs program.
Well, yeah. But we see how well those jobs programs have worked out, because if it wasn't for fracking or natural gas, that we'd be a net negative right now in the jobs creation arena, and which is actually sad, because we're in a situation where you have an increasing amount of our population that's in higher age brackets, people who do seek more care than they used to, and this should be a growing market, and it should be a growing market with quality jobs. But I'll tell you, everyone I know who's a doctor or has children who are very smart, who are making those kind of decisions of, do I become an engineer, a lawyer, or a doctor? Just about everybody is telling their kids, go become a lawyer, go become an engineer, do anything else but become a doctor. And I know doctors who are just simply closing down their practices because they can't deal with all this crazy stuff.
No, it's true, and you're seeing also a rise. We've done some good reporting over the years in the Weekly Standard of medical practitioners, who don't accept any form of insurance, and that's actually in some kind of smaller markets is a growing trend. If someone knows that they're in a small kind of farming community and there's just kind of a general practitioner doctor, they say, look, I don't take insurance, but I have affordable rates, and these are my prices. And kind of like the old community doctor who'd go door to door with a black bag. Going back to the days of Nixon and the kind of creation of large-scale health insurance, we've seen, the growth of a market and turn into not really a free market with all of these different states making different requirements and not allowing people to purchase across state lines and whatnot. And now we've seen it, effectively nationalized in what health insurance requires. Maybe the pendulum has to swing too far one way for things to get back to normal. But it's certainly not a fun time to be a doctor, especially when they've done absolutely nothing to address tort reform, which is a huge issue for costs for doctors, and one that the president refuses to believe is real.
Right. Well, I think when they passed this bill, they did everything but address the most pressing issues. And I just did a quick calculation. $3.7 billion that CMS estimates were the obligations for 2014. Now, if you took $3.7 billion and gave people $10,000 to go buy insurance policies, 370,000 Americans could have gained insurance that couldn't. Now, I don't know what the actual number is, like if we were to set up that type of a program, but clearly instead of hiring all these people to work in something that clearly they don't understand, because we can't build websites, they've messed up every last aspect of this program. The American people could have avoided this and really country civil war within our healthcare. If you think about it, both sides have been fighting over this for decades, really, but it's been an all-out war for years now, and still the majority of Americans didn't want this bill. They would like to see it go away and see the things that they were looking for in the first place actually be implemented to these minor corrections. But to me, if we could just help the few million people, for I don't know, maybe $10, $15 billion a year, and not completely mess up our entire healthcare system, don't you think that would be a better option?
I do, and it reminds me of an old forward that I dealt with when I worked on Capitol Hill. People would say, instead of the president's, $1 trillion stimulus package, give every American $50,000, and mandate that they, do X, Y, and Z, and the back of the napkin math is like, it's like 10 times the national debt. It was an absurd amount of money. But you're right, and a lot of people have pointed this out too. I mean, when you create such a huge program like this, you have to create a huge bureaucracy, oversight, and of course, you got to go after those evil insurers, which we're bailing out, of course, if they don't make enough money. But every dollar that comes from taxpayers to Washington, every little step along the way before it gets back to them in the case of subsidizing their health insurance, directly through a tax credit or an exchange or what have you, there's a little cut that goes along for overhead along the way, and that dollar gets smaller and smaller. So that's not a. I mean, I'm not sure Republicans would agree to that with no oversight. That's the issue. Is how do you conduct such a program with oversight? But the plans I've seen seem to appear to deliver insurance to those who might need it most at a far cheaper rate than Obamacare is currently doing.
Well, that's right. I opened up the show as I was introducing this segment, and I said, remember the famous promise that we were given that on average each American household will save approximately $2,500. And I would argue that we've probably seen increases of $2,500 per household, if not more, and it's only getting better. And what we're being offered in exchange is far shadier because we really don't know what we're getting.
Well, yeah, I mean, we do know what we're getting in some instances, unless you're privileged enough to work, and agree with a employer with closely held religious views, who won in the Hobby Lobby decision. Yes. We do know what we're getting in some ways, but right, you don't know exactly what you're getting because it's going to change from year to year. But we do know all the big promises that were made, regarding contraceptive care, which is of course at the forefront of everyone's minds when it comes to medical bankruptcy. Contraceptive care is way up there. But that's just the problem with mixing politics, healthcare, and getting in between decisions you should make with your family and your employer and your doctor. They say Republicans are divisive on social issues and want to wedge in there. I mean, Obamacare is an egregious example of doing precisely that.
I call that the Machiavellian tactic, and I think they've used it quite well.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Anyway, this is so. Just a last question on this, if we can. Now, I've seen various comments that were alluded to by, say, Chairman Dave Camp on the House Ways and Means Committee discussing the GAO report. But what's the next step here? Are the Republicans going to continue to push for better transparency, better numbers, better accounting? Is it? And the reason I ask this is because it seems to me that the issue in a whole has almost been dropped in a lot of circles within the GOP, almost seeing it as like, okay, we fought this for long enough, now it's time to move on to something else. But I don't think this is like the end of a day story. I feel like there are still major components that we should be, even if we can't repeal the whole bill, there are major pieces that still need to be fixed, repealed, or changed.
I don't have anything bad to say about Dave Camp. I worked on the House Ways and Means Committee for a brief time before I left the Hill. He's such a great member and, tenacious in trying to find answers. Some who are critical of him might say that he is less bombastic when compared to, some of the kind of more outspoken members of the conservative right. Sure. I don't think that the Ways and Means Committee in particular, is going. Kevin Brady is going to continue to push for these GAO reports. You think back to the days of Rostenkowski during the tax reform of the '80s. He was a prick, and Dave Camp is a consummate gentleman, and Kevin Brady might be a little bit more irascible. But I think that in the days going forward, we're not going to see any less amount of oversight from the House Ways and Means Committee, and you might even see a little bit more spicy oversight from the next Congress.
Yeah, and by the way, I wasn't being critical of Camp there, and I agree with you on Rostenkowski.
Nor was I.
And with regards to Rostenkowski, he really got his.
Yeah, he did. What goes around comes around. But Kevin Brady, he's going to do I think that the Ways and Means Committee is going to be in good hands.
Yeah, well, that's good to know. And I could tell you one thing. I feel as though a decade from now, you can call up my show and we'll still be talking about this issue. And unfortunately, I would love to see this bill go, because I think even just the way it was passed and the promises and just the whole beginning was so awful that just on that alone, the bill should be thrown out. And
hard to
start
clean up a train wreck on arrival,
Yeah.
Where to start?
Like the ship's sinking. Let's put a balloon in it, bring it back up to the surface, and duct tape the hole.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to work. I agree. Anyway, Jim Swift, thank you so much with the Weekly Standard. And could you please, do you have a Twitter handle that you'd like to share?
Yeah, it's kind of embarrassing because I've had it. It's like pretty much I got out of college, but it's Bomble, BOMBLE. But if that's too hard, it's JSwiftTWS is my kind of placeholder account. But old habits die hard.
Sounds great. Again, thank you so much, and we hope to talk to you again soon.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Jim Swift with the Weekly Standard. Thanks so much.